All right, so let's get started. Good morning, everyone. So in the last meeting, we learned the the modern art movement before avant-garde. Today, we're gonna see the art movement after the avant-garde. So let's just quickly remind this modern time period. So, second, let me just use highlighter. So the last meeting, we learned before avant-garde. So there was a huge event like the photography invented, and then people can use the handable light camera. So after that, many of artists switched their styles to the non-representational styles. So that art movement is called like avant-garde. So we learned realism, impressionism, post-impressionism in the last meeting, right? So today we are going to see the rest of the art movement after the avant-garde, Fauvism, expressionism, cubism, futurism, Dada, surrealism, and idealism. So there are so many art movement and many artists related to the new art movement. So please focus on the screen. So let's see what the avant-garde is first. So the avant-garde was originally a military term, referring to the detachment of soldiers that went first into battle. Avant-garde, which is a French term, means newest, latest, and the most advanced art. By the 1880s, the younger artists began to refer to themselves as the avant-garde. They were the boldest artists, going first into uncharted territory and waiting for others to catch up. The newest and change became artistic ideals. Each generation, even each group believed that it was their duty to go further than the one before. So we're gonna see the first art movement, Fauvism. In 1904, the artists of the Salon d'Armes organized a large exhibition of Cezanne, who is the father of the modern art. And in 1906, they mounted a major retrospective of Gauguin, the post-impressionist artist. We saw him the last meeting. But the most notorious exhibit of the Salon d'Armes was the one they organized for themselves in 1905. And it was then that a critic dubbed them fauves, means wild beast. The artist who emerged as the leader of the wild new trend in painting was Henri Matisse. So this is his painting. So let's see his work in detail. So this is Henri Matisse, who is a French artist. So he was a draftsman, printmaker, and sculptor, but he's known primarily as a painter. Matisse is commonly regarded, along with Pablo Picasso, as one of the artists who best helped to define the revolutionary developments in the visual arts throughout the opening decades of the 20th century, responsible for significant developments in painting and sculpture. So this is his work. How do you think? Can you feel the wild beast here? What can you see here through this painting?
Looks like a bunch of naked women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Anything else? How about the colors? Wake up, everyone. I know it's early in the morning. It's really hard to focus on, the abstract painting, but please focus on it.
So they use a lot of red, orange, yellow, and
Mhm.
some pink.
Yeah. So, so look at this title. The title is The Joy of Life. Can you feel the joy of life through this painting? It looks very natural and relaxed, right? With the bold color. Very interesting painting. So during his 12-year, Matisse often painted landscapes in the south of France during the summer and worked up ideas developed there into larger compositions upon his return to Paris. The Joy of Life, this painting, the second of his important imaginary compositions, and it is typical of this. So he used a landscape he had painted in Collier to provide the setting for the idol, but it is also influenced by ideas drawn from Watteau, Pushkin, Japanese woodcut, Persian miniatures, and 19th century Orientalist images of harems. So the scene is made up of independent motifs arranged to form a complete composition. The massive painting and its shocking colors received mixed reviews at the Salon des Independent. Critics noticed its new style, like broad fields of color and linear figures. And here's another Henry Matisse painting. So we can feel, the wild beast as well. So this is the final version of the dance, and it has a very different emotional character. So it has been described as forbidding, menacing, tribal, ritualistic, even demonic. Um, so the drum beats almost seem to be heard as simple. Pleasure of the original is overwhelmed. Now let's move on to the next art movement, Expressionism. So the Expressionism's fundamental purpose of art was to express their intense feelings toward the world. Expressionism describes any style where the artist's subjective feelings take precedence over objective observation. So I will share two expressionist artists. So this is the first expressionist artist, Edward Munch. Edward Munch is best known as being a Norwegian-born expressionist painter and printmaker. In the late 20th century, he played a great role in German expressionism and the art form that later followed, namely because of the strong mental anguish that was displayed in many of the pieces that he created. So let's see his work of art. Have you ever seen this work before?
Yeah, isn't it that picture called the Screaming Man or Screaming Person?
That's right. So can you guess the title of this painting? You just said that. It's a scream. Yeah.
Oh,
So
so it doesn't have like a man or a person, it's just Scream.
yes,
Okay. Okay.
very good. So probably some of you are familiar with this painting. It's very famous painting of the modern art. So the monk recalled that he had been out for a walk at sunset when suddenly the setting sunlight turned the cloud a blood red. So he sensed an infinite scream passing through nature. Scholars have located the spot to a fjord overlooking Oslo, and have suggested other explanations for the unnaturally orange color, ranging from the effects of a volcanic eruption to a psychological reaction by Munch to his sister's commitment at a nearby lunatic asylum. And now let's see next expressionist artist, Vasily Kandinsky. Vasily Kandinsky used to be a musician. So his work of art looks like very rhythmical and seems like we can listen to a music. So Vasily Kandinsky was one of the pioneer of abstract modern art and exploit the evocative interrelation between color and form to create an aesthetic experience that engaged the sight, sound, and emotions of the public. Morning, Melissa.
Morning, Professor. Sorry, I meant to send that to you, not the whole class.
I just saw your message. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so this is Vasily Kandinsky's painting. So how do you think? It's totally abstract, right? So, as I said, he used to be a musician. So so whenever he create a painting, he always listened to the music, and then he got the inspiration from the sound and then created as a visual language like this. So he believed that the total abstraction offered the possibility for profound transcendental expression, and that copying from nature only interfered with this process. And this is another his painting with geometric shapes and lines, very rhythmical. Now, let's move on to the next art movement, Cubism. So we learned the Cubism before when we learned collage, right? Yeah, so this name looks very familiar with us, Georges Braque, and we will see Pablo Picasso for this art movement of modern art. So Cubism is a style of painting and sculpture developed in the early 20th century, characterized chiefly by an emphasis on formal structure. The reduction of natural forms to their geometrical equivalence, and the organization of the planes of represented object independently of representational requirements. So the most popular and famous Cubist artist is Pablo Picasso. Yes. So Pablo Picasso is probably the most important figure of 20th century in terms of art and art movements that occurs over this period. So before the age of 50, the Spanish born artist had become the most well-known name in modern art with the most distinct style and eye for artistic creation. So let's see a very interesting painting together. So this is Pablo Picasso's very aggressive style of cubism painting. So everyone, please focus on this painting, and can you guess what the artist described in this painting? I know it's very hard. Very hard, very tough. Okay, so he represents a object, something. No
That's
idea.
really hard. No idea.
I know, truly no idea. So let me just give some hint. It's a figure. It's a person. And can you focus on this? And this is a musical instrument. I know, still hard.
I'm sorry, I literally don't see anything.
That's right. So let's just, expand your imagination. So Pablo Picasso painted a guitarist here. So the top part here, now this is the head of the guitarist. And this part is torso, the shoulder and the body. And this is the guitar. So the artist simplified all the body parts and reorganized them in this painting. I know it's very hard, but interesting. So let me share a video to see this painting a little bit closer.
We're in the Pompidou Center in Paris looking at a painting by Pablo Picasso called The Guitarist from 1910.
This is what is often referred to as analytic cubism.
Analytic in the idea of taking something apart, analyzing the parts of something, and you can see that does look like a jigsaw puzzle where the forms have been disassembled.
It's an abstraction.
The further we stand back from the painting, the more I can see the forms of a man, a head, shoulders, elbows, the fingerboard of the guitar, the rounded forms of the outside of the guitar.
But I don't think that Picasso meant this to be a puzzle that we're supposed to put back together. Although Picasso is best known for abstracted paintings such as this, it's important to remember that Picasso was something of a child prodigy. He could draw in the academic style beautifully. For the previous 400 or 500 years, Western art had been preoccupied with naturalism, with representing the natural world as carefully and exactly as possible.
Representing the world as it appears to our eyes.
An artist developed a toolkit to do this. This included linear perspective,
using light and shadow to create the illusion of three-dimensional form.
The problem that Picasso faced is that the modern world was one that felt ruptured. Old systems no longer felt valid.
The early 20th century is a time of tremendous upheaval. There is a sense that vision itself is unreliable.
Picasso was grappling specifically with the issue that painting was a kind of illusion, a representation of three-dimensional form and space on a two-dimensional surface.
A system of representation.
So could Picasso invent a new language for representation, but one that was not hiding the two-dimensionality of the canvas, but rather putting that in the forefront? So let's look closely at this painting and see if we can understand how Picasso has done this here. Picasso has simplified the human form.
We see diagonals, horizontals, vertical lines in black. We see circles that intersect.
But it's so abstracted that if we oriented it as if it were a landscape, we might expect to see the rooftops of a village instead of a man holding a guitar.
The fundamentals of perspective that governed Western painting for so long supposed a single viewer fixed in front of a work of art and showed us that view.
And Cézanne, in the late 19th century, had developed those ideas. Cézanne said, instead of standing in one place, looking from one point in space and time, I actually move around the thing that I'm painting.
Even if you don't move around it, what if you slightly turn your head to the right or to the left? The reality is that one's view is constantly changing and shifting.
And Picasso takes that idea and runs with it. What would happen if you represented this man holding a guitar over time from multiple perspectives?
That's a different kind of truth than the truth that Western painting had given us for 500 years.
So this is not less true, it's just differently true.
Picasso has also emptied the painting of much of its color.
And much of its content. We don't see hands, we don't see a face, we don't see emotion. The things that generally draw us into a painting of a person, what Picasso is interested in instead is the structural logic of the language that he's inventing. And he's inventing it not by himself, but with his compatriot George Braque.
And we still do have some illusion of space. There is a shallow relief here. We have light and shade. We have the movement between those pale tones and darker shadows. So there is a suggestion of a form there. This is not entirely flat, but it certainly is reminding us of the flatness of the canvas that this is painted on.
And as you said, he's reducing color so that we focus on line, on form, on mass, on structure. The colors are reduced to some browns and whites and blacks and perhaps some pale greens.
So we have light and shade that suggests three-dimensional form, and we have overlapping of shapes that also suggests depth.
But not deep space. This is a shallow space, maybe a few inches, just enough for the fractured forms that are represented. It's as if Picasso has taken a series of views of the human body and reconstructed them on the two-dimensional plane.
I find a tension between the title, the guitarist, and the painting itself.
Without the title as a prompt, you'd be hard-pressed to locate the man or the guitar. This is a painting that is about the way that painting itself works. Picasso here is on the edge of abstraction, but this is not pure abstraction. It is not entirely divorced from the world that we see. Throughout his entire career, Picasso remained interested in the tension between what we see and the way in which we depict it.
Very interesting. It's a totally new language of art. All right, so now let me share a better painting to see. This one. So this painting is also very famous. So what can you see, everyone, in this painting?
Naked figures. I'm assuming they're women. I think they all look like women.
That's right. That's right. And how do they look?
It looks like he's taking body like body parts and like place them together like kind of puzzle pieces, not like one figure.
That's right. So it is a large oil painting created in 1907 by Pablo Picasso. And this work, it's a part of the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, the MoMA. And it portrays 5 nude female prostitutes in a brothel on Avignon. So each figure is depicted in a disconcerting, confrontational manner, and none is conventionally feminine. So the women appear slightly menacing and are rendered with angular and disjointed body shapes. The 3 figures, on the left exhibit facial features in Iberian style of Picasso's native Spain, and while the 2 here on the 2 the right are shown with African mask-like features. The racial primitivism evoked in this mask, according to Pablo Picasso, moved him to liberate an utterly original artistic style of compelling, even savage force. And here's another painting. Now we saw the Guernica before, and these are the series of Guernica. So again, on 26 April 1937, the Air Force of Nazi Germany bombed the Basque town of Guernica. The attack was carried out in support of General Franco's nationalist forces. So it was one of the worst atrocities of the Spanish Civil War. Pablo Picasso responded to the massacre by painting the large anti-war mural Guernica. And he also made a number of additional paintings of a figure from the mural, a woman, also the woman holding her dead body. So this painting, The Weeping Woman, is the last of the series. The figure is based on artist and photographer Dora Maar, who documented the making of Guernica. In 1914, the conflict broke out in the Balkan Peninsula. So soon as the result of treaties and alliances, every major power in Europe was drawn into war. The soldiers, with their heads full of gallant ideas about battle, rushed headlong into the most horrible death imaginable. So the war is still, continuing. So in 1916, a group of artists waiting out the war in Zurich, in neutral Switzerland, banding together as a protest art movement, and that is called Dada. So Dada was anti-art, anti-middle class society, anti-politicians, anti-good manners, anti-business as usual, anti all that had brought about the war. So in that sense, Dada was a big no. But Dada was also big yes, yes for creativity, to life, to silliness, to spontaneity. So Marcel Duchamp was a French-American painter, sculptor, chess player, and writer whose work is associated with Cubism, Dada, and conceptual art. So we saw this artist before, with the fountain, the ready-made work. This is his earliest painting work. This work is widely regarding as a modernist classic and has become one of the most famous of its time. So before its first presentation at the 1912 Salon d'Independence in Paris, it was rejected by the Cubists as being too futurist. So these work looks familiar with us, ready-made style work. So the ready-made of Marcel Duchamp are ordinary manufactured objects that the artist selected and modified as an antidote to what he called retinal art. By simply choosing the object or objects and repositioning or joining, titling, and signing it, the found object became art. Now, let's move on to the next art movement, Surrealism. Surrealism was formulated in Paris in the 1920s. Like Dada, Surrealism was not a style, but a way of life. Fascinated by the theories of the psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, who was then setting out his revolutionary ideas in Vienna, the surrealists appreciated the power of a dream. So that is the most important part. The mysterious of conscious and the lure of the bizarre, the irrational, the incongruous, and the marvelous. So I will share two surrealist artists. So this is the first artist, Salvador Dali. Dali was a Spanish surrealist artist. I know his, mustache looks, funny. His, yeah, his work also very interesting. Yeah, very good artist. So Dali was a skilled draftsman, best known for the striking and bizarre images in his work. His painterly skills are often attributed to the influence of Renaissance masters. So it looks like this. So this is his work. How do you think? We can see his skill is, from the, mastered the Renaissance, styles. We can see it. His technique is perfect, but the story looks very, odd and, looks like a dreamlike. How do you think?
I like it. I like how it looks like the clocks are like melting or something.
That's right. It's melting in the desert. Yep. Looks cool. So this, I'm sorry. The work title is Persistence of Memory. It is a 1931 painting by Dali, and one of the most recognizable works of surrealism. So the iconography may refer to a dream that Dali himself had experienced, and the clocks. The clocks may symbolize the passing of time as one experiences in sleep, or the persistence of time in the eyes of the dreamer. And we can see there is a orange clock at the left bottom corner of the painting, and it covered ants. It covers an ant, and the ants, a common theme in Dali's work, represent decay of the painting. In particularly when they attack a gold watch, and they seem grotesquely organic. And this monotonous flashy creature draped across the painting's center is at once alien and familiar. So it's an approximation of Dali's own face in profile. So nose. This is an eye with the eyelash. So its long eyelashes seem disturbingly insect-like or even sexual. as does what may or may not be the tongyu oozing from its nose. This one, like a fat snail. So I will share a video to see this painting closer. So this painting is pretty much small.
At the Museum of Modern Art, there is this tiny painting by Salvador Dali, which is the painting that everybody wants to see. That and Starry Night by Van Gogh are the two stars. And I thought it would be really interesting to talk about why this painting is so wildly popular. So this is The Persistence of Memory by Salvador Dali.
And here, I understand why people kind of connect to it now. I mean, anybody who's ever tried to make an album for a rock band is inspired by Salvador Dali. There's also this kind of fun of what are you looking at? He's really playing with reality, and it's kind of like a visual brain teaser.
Is that it? Is it so popular? Is it on album cover art because it's this attack on the rational, and that's such a seductive idea?
Yeah, it's mind trippy. I like the way you phrase it. It's an attack on the rational. I mean, I guess there might be more to it. That's my sense.
You were talking about album cover art and posters on, maybe a dorm room. And what's interesting is that these artists took these ideas really seriously. This was surrealism. This was painted in 1931. Dali, this Spanish artist, this Catalan artist, had just come to Paris and had joined the surrealist group.
I'm assuming he's considered significant because he was the first person to essentially do dreamscapes and these, as you mentioned, attack on the rational.
When you walk into this painting and visually, you enter into this really deep, open, and lonely space. And it's this really quiet image.
Yeah, it's kind of this desert scape. Ignoring the melting clocks for a moment, you feel that, okay, if you were in this landscape, yes, time really does not really carry a lot of weight. You could just kind of wither there and die and no one would care. Even that kind of water in the background, there's no waves in it. It's like they've had time to settle down. There's literally no activity.
There's this unbearable sense of quiet. There is almost no movement, and I think it does feel very desert-like and very hot. Literally, time has melted, right? But we have this absurd environment. We do have this very naturalistic rendering, but the things that are being rendered are not naturalistic at all. You mentioned the dead tree on the left, but it's growing out of something that seems clearly man-made or at least geometric, a tabletop perhaps. You have ants that seem to be eating and attracted to a piece of metal as opposed to a piece of rotted flesh.
Oh, that's what that is. I couldn't fully make it out. Okay, so they're eating away at a timepiece. That's fascinating.
And of course, you have the drooping clocks. And that's such an interesting and evocative idea because time is something that is so regimented. Time is something that rules us, that is so associated with the industrial culture that we live in. And here, it responds to the environment as we respond to the environment.
Well, one, you have that tabletop, and there's another one in the background. And even the way that the light is set up, especially in that cliff, it looks like it's sunset. So it's kind of like, hey, just another day has passed. Who cares?
Now, there are some identifiable things. I mean, for all of the absurdity and for all of the impossibility of what we're seeing, there are some things that art historians have recognized. The cliffs in the back are, we think, the cliffs of the Catalonian coast in northern Spain where Dali is from. And so this is his childhood, perhaps. Some art historians have concluded that that strange figure, almost a profile face, can you just make out an eye with extremely long lashes and perhaps a tongue under a nose?
This is the whole optical illusion part of Dali. Yeah, I thought it was like a blanket, but now I completely see the eyelashes. I thought it was a duck for a second, too. I see the eyelashes and the top of a nose.
Yeah, Dali does that funny thing where one object can actually be several things at once, sometimes really convincingly. Some art historians think this is his face, but elusive and very much a kind of dream.
Well, I mean, that goes back into the category of this is more of that kind of door move, optical illusion type art.
Well, that's right. Surrealism posited that the rational world that we have so much faith in was perhaps not worthy of all of that faith, that the irrational was just as important, but was something that we had sublimated, something that we had tried to drive out of our life. And the way that these artists and writers thought about it was if only they could retrieve the world of the dream. Some of the artists had read Freud, some of them had only heard sort of secondhand accounts of Freud. But the idea that the dream was a place where the irrational mind came to the fore unrestricted.
This is something that I guess often confronts me, is even the notions that how we perceive what we think as objective reality is really based on how our brain is wired. We see these causes and effects. We see linear time. This is how humans are wired. I mean, I think that's what's fun about these type of things. It kind of says, well, look, there's different forms of reality, and who are we as creatures that are wired one particular way to be all that judgmental about what's real.
When people have looked at this painting, they have sometimes, and I think unconvincingly, tried to link it to Einstein's earlier ideas of the
time dilation and
exactly. And the time was not, in fact, a strict thing. But I think there's more evidence that Dali is thinking about ideas of a philosopher whose name is Bergson, who thought about time as something that was not simply what struck on a clock, but that there was a kind of human time that was more subjective and that expanded and contracted according to our experience.
Time is this thing that sometimes scares us because we completely don't understand it, even though it's kind of the most fundamental component of our existence. We fundamentally don't understand it, and we try to measure it out. We try to constrain it, define it in some way that makes sense to us. Actually, I think that's what this piece is maybe trying to do, is that, look, these clocks are stupid. These are just our futile attempts to try to label. It's kind of like if you label something or if you measure something, you feel like you actually understand it, even though you don't.
I think this is that moment when all those safe ideas of objectivity are being blown out of the water. And we're seeing an art that is, in some really interesting ways, confronting that.
So now let's move on to the next surrealist artist, Rene Magritte. So Rene Magritte was a Belgian surrealist artist. He became well known for creating several witty and thought-provoking images, often depicting originally objects in an unusual context. His work is known for challenging observers' preconditions, perceptions of reality. So this is his work. So this piece depicts a scene of Raining Man. Looks very interesting. So nearly identical to each other, dressed in dark overcoats and bowler hats, who seem to be either falling down like raindrops, floating up like helium balloons, or just stationed in midair as no movement or motion is implied. The backdrop features red roofed buildings and a mostly blue, partly cloudy sky, lending credence to the theory that the men are not raining. Many of surrealists' interest in masks, disguises, and what lies beyond or beneath the visual surfaces like this Rene Magritte's painting. So the surrealism offered a personal solution to life during the years following the trauma of World War I, but in the view of many artists, society, and possibly even human nature itself, had to be transformed to that such a horror would not happen again. So their art could play a central role in bringing about a better society was a 19th century idea. Yet it found renewed application after World War I in a collective approach. So in the arts, the idealism encourages imagination and attempts to realize a mental conception of beauty a standard of perfection juxtaposed to aesthetic naturalism and realism. So the artist of this title reduced art to essential geometric shapes and primary colors, believing that these were universally understood visual language. The most famous artist associated with this title was Piet Mondrian. So this is Piet Mondrian. Piet Mondrian is a Dutch painter, and he is known for being one of the pioneers of 20th century abstract art, as he changed his artistic direction from figurative painting to an increasingly abstract style, until he reached a point where his artistic vocabulary was reduced to simple geometric elements. So Mondrian's art was highly utopian and was concerned with a search for universal values and aesthetics. So this is his work. So as the years progressed, lines began to take precedence over forms in Mondrian's paintings. In the 1930s, he began to use thinner line and double lines more frequently, punctuated with new small colored forms, if any at all. So double lines particularly excited Mondrian, for he believed they offered his paintings a new dynamism, which he was eager to explore. So I'm going to share a video about the Mondrian's painting. So in that video, this painting is so much gives some inspiration to the contemporary artists and the designers. I will share a video about how to recreate this Mondrian's utopian painting in the contemporary art.
These colors and grids are the hallmark of artist Piet Mondrian. But the same artist, still known today for his instantly recognizable patterns, started out painting these. This summer, an exhibit at the Gemeente Museum in The Hague traces Mondrian's path from that to this. Benno Temple, the museum's director, explains.
So in the Netherlands there has always been a very strong tradition in landscape painting, dating back from the 17th century. And it was almost a golden rule. The horizon was low, so you had 1/3 of the painting being a landscape and 2/3 of the painting being sky with the famous Dutch clouds.
But even in his early career, Mondrian is ready to break the rules.
He has this early painting around 1900, a ditch by a farm. A landscape with the horizon very high, so there's almost no sky. And there is a tree standing in the foreground of the painting, dividing the painting into, you could almost say, squares and lines.
In 1911, Mondrian moves to Paris, where the Cubist painters Georges Braque and Pablo Picasso influenced Mondrian to experiment with increasingly abstract styles. In 1915, Mondrian returns to the Netherlands and joins the Laren artist colony, where he befriends two artists who push him even further toward abstraction. Together, these three participate in the founding of the De Stijl movement. Like many artistic movements at the time, this group tried to make a definite break from the past. No more Dutch clouds and windmills for these guys. Mondrian calls his style at this time neoplasticism. Mondrian writes,
"This new plastic idea will ignore the particulars of appearance. On the contrary, it should find its expression in the abstraction of form and color, that is to say, in the straight line in the clearly defined primary color."
It all boils down to straight lines and primary colors, the signature Mondrian look you see in stores and on runways today. But despite how far Mondrian's style evolved from Dutch landscapes, it's still possible to see a connection to his early works.
Although they're completely different, one is figurative, the other is abstract. You see that it's almost the same division of picture planes. And that's not done on purpose, it's done by intuition.
All right. So we're gonna take a break for 5 minutes. So everyone, please come back. All right. So let's see what the transformational self-portrait drawing is. You know, we learned the art history of Western art, and we saw it shows dynamic changes for 1,000 years. But when we just highlight centuries, we can simply divide into two big threads of art styles, like representational art and non-representational art. So representational art is this, like Leonardo da Vinci's painting. It is a type of recording in which the scenery information about physical object is described in a medium. So it is an observational and figurative art. So there are lots of representational self-portrait in the history of Western art. So let me share the example. This is the Rembrandt self-portrait painting and Choclow's representational self-portrait painting. You know what? This is not a picture. This is a painting with a huge size. You can see this painting when you visit the Metropolitan Museum. It will be, as I remember, it was the second floor of the museum. It's a large acrylic black and white painting. And this is Frida Kahlo's self-portrait painting with an exotic background. And Vincent van Gogh's self-portrait. Even though his brush stroke is very bold and you will see the thick outline of this figure, but it's still we can say it's a representational style painting, since he painted based on himself. He didn't disorganize any shape of in this painting. And Salvador Dali's self-portrait, the surrealist artist. Now let's see non-representational art. So this is Vasily Kandinsky's painting, the musical artist painting, the expressionist artist. So there are many styles of the non-representational art. It can be abstract, non-figurative, non-objective, non-realistic, and imaginary art styles. So let me show you the non-representational self-portrait style. This is Choclow's another self-portrait in non-representational way. So he used abstract motifs to paint himself. Can you guess whose self-portrait is?
Pablo
Picasso.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, Pablo Picasso. Looks very cubist style. And this is Basquiat's self-portrait painting. We saw this painting, $110 million painting. So we learned many of modern art, many of modern artists already mastered the traditional way. In other words, not representational art style, like this, the left one. So you know what, these are all the Pablo Picasso's work. So again, he mastered the representational art style, the traditional art style, like this charcoal self-portrait drawing. But since the photograph's invention, many artists did the avant-garde art movement, the newest art movement, and abandoned the traditional style and sought new style of art. So the middle painting looks like traditional, the period of the art style. So from the left to the right. So we can see his work change process. So as now camera developed, there are many diverse art movement arose here, right? And the art movement, we call the avant-garde newest art. So we saw before the avant-garde and after the avant-garde. So let's just quickly remind what we learned in this chapter, the modern art. So before the avant-garde, we learned in the last meeting, realism, impressionism, post-impressionism, right? And after the avant-garde, we learned today, Fauvism, expressionism, cubism, futurism, Dada, surrealism, and idealism. So again, before the avant-garde art movement, these three art movements are still based on the observational. However, the after avant-garde, non-representational art movements arose because representational art was not meaningful anymore. So that's what we learned so far. So let's just review what we learned today. So we learned the Fauvism, expressionism, another expressionism, and cubism, Dada, and surrealism, and idealism. So just like the modern artist, we are going to do the transformational self-portrait drawing based on what we learned in this modern art chapter. So here is the transformational self-portrait drawing process. Step 1, please draw yourself in representational style, which means the traditional style, or you're going to take a picture of yourself. So basically for this project, the transformational self-portrait drawing, you're going to make 2 work of art. So one should be representational style, which means traditional style. And next one should be non-representational, which means abstract or non-objective style. So step 1, for the step 1, the representational style, you can draw yourself as the traditional style, or you can just take a picture of yourself. Either way will be fine. I always say photograph is also a piece of art. So you can just take a picture. If you are too busy to create 2 pieces of work, then you can just take a picture of yourself for the representational style. And step 2, choose one of the modern art style after avant-garde. That's the point. So after avant-garde, the art movement we learned today, which means abstract style. And step 3, transform your representational style, self-portrait drawing or picture, into the non-representational style based on the modern art style you choose. Now you're gonna choose one of the art movement after avant-garde, and then you're gonna transform yourself, your self-image into the new style of art, like following the the art movements style we learned today. And step 4, please finish the abstract self-portrait and color it. Again, you must show 2 different styles of self-portrait when you submit with the short description and which modern art movement style you apply into your drawing. So for this project, you will need a sketchbook, pencil, eraser, and any color medium you have. Also, probably you will need a camera or your phone. Please post 2 styles of your self-portrait, like again, representational or and non-representational style with a short description. And please write which modern art style you apply into your non-representational self-portrait. So again, let's remind what we learned for the abstract style of art after avant-garde. So we learned Fauvism, Expressionism, Cubism, Dada, Surrealism, Idealism. So after taking a picture of yourself or after drawing yourself as a self-portrait style, and then you will choose one of these art movement after avant-garde, and then you're going to apply their style into your second abstract drawing. So does it make sense, the work process? Any question before I share the abstract painting examples?
No, I don't have any questions.
Good. So the representational self-portrait styles are so popular. So now you can just take take a picture of yourself. So instead of drawing yourself, so I will just share the abstract self-portrait examples. So this is a Cubism style self-portrait. Looks cute with the bold color. The color looks like Fauvism. And Cubism style self-portrait. Also Cubism. And I can say this is an Expressionism style. Also another Expressionism style. Expressionism style. Cubism style. Also another Cubism style. Cubism style. It's slightly mixed like an Expressionism style. And the Fauvism. Another Fauvism, like a wild beast. Oh, it's a Fauvism. And it's Surrealism now. And Expressionism style. Expressionism style. And another Expressionism style. And we can say this is a Surrealism style as well. And Dada style. Another Expressionism style. And Expressionism style. So that's it. By next Monday night, please post your work process of this transformational self-portrait drawing. And No, it's in week 12. Here. So you will see the sketchbook project slides we just saw together here. And then, as usual, we have another activity, discussion. So this discussion topic is very easy and meaningful for us. So this is the topic. We have been suffering from COVID-19, right? And the virus has changed our life. So some scholars said that the stress from COVID-19 is just the same as the world wars. Now, there are diverse art movements during world wars in 19th and 20th centuries. Artists showed their physical and psychological wounds through their art in a variety of ways. So, which art style or artist work is representing your feeling in this pandemic crisis? So please choose one of the modern art movement. It's listed below here with the the videos example, and please tell us why it represents your feeling. So after this meeting, please watch the videos. Now, I didn't share all of the videos in the meeting, because it can be boring. So please, watch all the videos independently, so you can understand how they express their self, the artist's self, to show their wound and feeling during the world wars. That's it.